Okay, so let's use our next strategy to help us find a research question and use critical thinking questions. So what that means, let's go ahead and look at the book and see what it says. This is on page 115 in Engaging Questions. So critical thinking is analytical. With X being your topic, you might ask, what are the causes of X? So what are the causes of, like, I can think about, yeah, I think that's an interesting, like question. Like, what are the causes of social justice advertising from major companies? I don't think I have a fixed phrase for this yet. I'll figure it out by the time I write my paper. But I can think about, um, so what are the implication or effects of X? So okay, so what are the implications or effects of, here I'll just copy that, of social justice advertising for major companies? So there, I think some of those questions were a little bit covered by my reporter's questions, but that's okay. We can have some overlap. It's, interesting to think about. So what larger context or contexts does X belong to? So let's see, what larger context or contexts? So or context does social justice advertising for major companies belong in? All right, so that's another good question. What issues are people debating about X? And then they give the example. The topic of drug wars in Mexico, people are debating the possible entry of the United States contract employees to assist the Mexican government. Is this a good idea? So, sorry, what was that question again? What issues are people debating about X? So, what issues are people debating about social justice advertising for major companies? So that's, I think, another interesting question. What do people think about X? How could you question the conventional thinking? For example, conventional thinking about curing traffic congestion on freeways is to widen them. Is there any evidence that this thinking is wrong? So what do most people think about X? How could you question the conventional thinking? So what do most people think about social justice advertising for major companies? How could you question the conventional thinking? So, I think it helps, like, go through and answer a few of these questions, write a few sentences, see which, like, kind of sticks out to you, what's going to be interesting. So, what are the causes of social justice advertising for major companies? So I think, we see issues like Black Lives Matter, gay rights, and others becoming more mainstream and getting more support. I think that's a big part of it. And companies want to capitalize on it, want to show their allyship, all those things. What are the implications or effect of social justice advertising for major companies? So I think, there's a lot of effects. So, like, people learn about these social issues. So, maybe, it's possible that, like, maybe the image of these groups becomes more normal. So you can see maybe there's like a family that, like, with gay parents in it, and that might be something that for some people is fairly common, but for other people that's not so common. So having that, like, in an advertisement or something like that, is going to make it more normal, make it more accepted, and that can be a good thing for certain groups. And I mean, there's also, what are some of the implication or effects? So we've got this idea of thinking about other implications, other effects. There can also be maybe negative effects where, like, the company profits but doesn't help the cause. Maybe the company misrepresents the cause. So I think we saw in class, we watched, or maybe some of the classes, we got to see the Pepsi advertisement with Kylie Jenner or Kendall Jenner, sorry. And we got to see where, like, that was an advertisement where Pepsi was trying to promote a good cause, trying to talk about a good idea, but they did it in a very poor way. So that can also happen when companies try and help. So I'm not going to answer all these questions, but I think, you can see, like, oh, we get all these cool ideas. And then we can look at the topic from different perspectives. So let's go ahead and look at engaging questions and see what it says there. So look at your topic from different perspectives. Consider how different groups of people might look at your topic from different angles. On the topic of tearing down houses to build bigger ones, how do developers look at an older neighborhood with small homes, many in disrepair, sitting on valuable land? How is this perspective different from that of a young couple with children who want a large home in a close-in neighborhood? What about members of the neighborhood who want to see their property values go up? Are any of these perspectives can furnish an angle on the topic? So and I think, especially as we're considering the different people that are involved in this, that's going to be super important with corporate social responsibility, because we're thinking about the company, we're thinking about those directly connected, we're thinking about those indirectly connected, and it's really hard for there to be like a win-win or win-win-win, and for everybody to do well in this situation. And generally, a lot of times we see, like, if one end of the equation or one part of the, gets an advantage, someone else, that's going to come at the expense of someone else. Not always, but it can happen that way. So from different perspectives. So we've got this topic of social justice and advertising for major companies. So what about someone who supports the cause? Someone who doesn't support the cause. Maybe you've got, because there's going to be some people, like, people watch the Colin Kaepernick ad and had really negative reactions to it, and, decided to not buy any more Nike stuff. So someone who doesn't support the cause, they don't like what they see. They stop supporting the company. So, and you can also think about what effect that has on the company itself. So someone who supports the cause, maybe they're happy, depending on, whether or not the ad was done well, or maybe it wasn't done well. I think that can depend on, these different things. If the ad was done well, maybe they're unhappy if the ad wasn't done well. So maybe, think about it from the perspective of the company. Happy if they gain money. Maybe they, you can be cynical and say they don't care about the cause, only the money. Yeah, that's one possibility. Maybe they do really care about the cause. So you can think about that. So we've got all of these different ideas. We spent a lot of time thinking about, these different ideas. And I want to take a look at the examples of the research questions that they give. So we've got, these student examples where they're turning a topic into a research question. So we've got this idea of the student who wanted to write on the topic of teardowns. She could approach the research by asking those different questions. And I just want to kind of remind us, when we were looking at the teardown epidemic, that was from the student who had to write a class on a class assigned paper having to do with the environment. So she looked around her neighborhood, noticed many smaller, older homes being torn down, only to be replaced by larger, newer homes that removed existing trees and grass and required more energy to heat and cool. So we've got that idea. I think we've also got, it was mentioned in this part of the text where it says look at your topic from different angles. So looking at from the developers, things like that. So we've seen these ideas woven through. So here are some example research questions. What are the causes of the teardown epidemic? Why do people want to replace traditional small homes with giant new ones? Why do Americans think they need such large homes? How does this change impact the neighborhood? Who is hurt by this trend and who gains? What is the environmental impact of replacing smaller houses with bigger ones? So as I'm thinking about like what's interesting to me and what I might want to gain from my process, I think, some of the questions I come up with, are ones listed here, but the idea of when a company shows their support for a social justice cause, I'm going to think about like, what are the ramifications of that? The ramifications. I'm going to just say, what are the effects? Because that's a better word. What are the effects of that? So, and how are the stakeholders impacted? So actually, you know what? I guess I am curious about the company, but I think I'm mostly curious about the groups who become the target, who their image is used. So I feel like I'm mostly concerned about them. So that can be something that I decide later. And as you're thinking about your structure for this, some of it's going to depend on how you write or what you can find. So I think what I would want to do is I would want my body paragraphs arranged where there's, maybe an explanation of the phenomenon, like benefits for, I think, the company, because I think, that's important to consider, maybe times that companies have benefited from it. So like, or effects on company. And then I want to think about like the most important thing that I'm curious about is going to be like positive effects for group that's the topic of the advertising. Positive effects, and then also the negative effects. So the consequences that might happen. So I'm going to think about the negative effects for groups that's the topic of advertising, because I think that there's a way that we're going to see like, oh, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. So we've got these different ideas. And these are how I'm going to, this is how I think I would structure my writing. And if I needed, some, additional information, I could do that. But we want to look at examples. I think some of these can maybe be expanded into more paragraphs. If I needed to make the effects on company 2 paragraphs, like the positive and negative, that's fine. But I maybe want to think about, in the explanation, give examples, viewer response, things like that, how it's received, so things like that. These ads are received and perceived. So I'll include some examples of these kinds of advertisements so you can kind of understand what I'm talking about when I mention these ideas. But right now, I've got my research question. So when a company shows their support for a social justice cause, what are the effects of that, and how are the stakeholders impacted? So that's my research question, and then this is kind of my outline for now. I'm going to go do my research and hopefully I'll come up with an awesome paper on corporate social responsibility.